Welcome everyone to Community First Development's webinar launch of a First Nations approach to community development. I'm Steph Harvey. I'm a Aboriginal woman and CEO of Community First Development, and today I'll be supporting the conversation based on questions you've provided to us to learn more about our approach. I'm speaking to you today from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and before I introduce our special guest and our distinguished panellists, I wanted to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land I'm on and the land and sea countries you're on. We have a lot of guests with us today from our countries right around Australia, but also attending from other First Nations countries. And I pay my respects to you and all elders and ancestors, and I welcome you all. Launching our framework today will be special guest Auntie Pat Anderson, AO, and I'll introduce her in a moment. Our panellists today are Wiradjuri woman Renee Tomkinson. Renee is a regional manager from Community First Development and manages the Eastern region. Doyen Radcliffe, who is a Yamaji Nagaja man over in WA, and he's a regional manager for Western region. Doyen will be a little delayed joining us today. He's stuck in traffic, but we'll bring him on as soon as he's available. We have Wiradjuri woman Vicki Thom. Vicki is the director of Mob Aboriginal Corporation. And Wajak Nunga man, Devon Cuimara, the founder and CEO of Aboriginal Males Healing Centre. It is now my very great pleasure and my privilege to introduce a Nyara woman, Pat Anderson. And for many of you, no introductions needed. Pat holds and has held many distinguished leadership positions and is utterly committed to improving outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's an honour for us and for Community First Development to know that Pat supports our approach that we take to working alongside our communities. And we know that the work that we do is building on the work of our elders like Auntie Pat and our ancestors. We are part of a continuing journey of doing things the right way. I now invite you, Pat, to launch the framework on this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph, for that very generous welcome. I'm actually delighted to be here and really pleased that I was invited to launch the report. So I want to recognise the launch of the First Nations approach to community development because it's a significant milestone for Community First Development. It's a great organisation, great people doing great work. It is also significant for all of us working with First Nations peoples and communities. Community development can have transformative impacts on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and families, but it must be managed thoughtfully and together with First Nations peoples to deliver positive outcomes. Over the years, I have encountered many approaches to working with us. While often well-intentioned, far too many proved to be ineffective and did not facilitate meaningful empowerment or change for us. They learned a lot, we learned very little. I strongly believe the principles of social justice and the right to self-determination must ground any initiatives in order to succeed. This must be the first basic principle. The heart of self-determination, First Nations people, is having the power to make the decisions that affect our daily lives. I also believe we must learn from organisations that have successfully delivered community development initiatives in the past, and we have many. Community First Development's framework is an essential guide in the field of community development, both in Australia and indeed internationally. What makes this guide unique is it is developed by a First Nations organisation with years of experience working at the grassroots level with First Nations peoples across Australia. Community First Development operates with ethical intentions and actions, and their approach is one that firmly places Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the centre and is truly grounded in social justice and self-determination. These key factors in the organisation's powerful relationship with communities and continued success. Over the last decade, government and other institutions have committed to improving their engagement with First Nations peoples. This includes working in partnership with us, learning from us, elevating our voices, and co-designing initiatives and solutions. This practical and ethical guide will be extremely valuable for policymakers, practitioners, academics, and anyone working with or considering working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It's essential reading, in fact. It is an essential guide and provides the opportunity to learn from the experiences of First Nations organisation that is working meaningfully with First Nations people, and that's the Community Development Organisation. I encourage people to have a read and reflect on the guide and consider how their initiatives can respect, promote and fulfil the right to self-determination for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Pat. As I was saying, it means a great deal to us to know we are working right way and have the support of our elders such as yourself. And it's saying what we're doing and doing what we're saying and just not being gammon about it. So today, the webinar is around talking about the way we're working, and I know that a large bunch of you listening in today are practitioners, and so we will be coming to the panelists shortly and answering some questions that you were given to us beforehand, and talking with you some of those questions, the answers that you will find in the framework, but we can talk a little bit more broadly today. So some of you may be familiar with Community First Development, and some of you are new to our organisation. So I'll give you a quick overview and some context, and then we can get into those questions. We're a Community First development organisation and research organisation. We're First Nations organisation, and our vision is to see First Nations people and communities thriving. So really trying to move away from any deficit language around closing the gap or reducing disadvantage. We want to move beyond the gap and see our people and our communities thriving. We promote the skills, talents and cultural strength of our people and facilitate activities where they lead positive change for their communities. In 2020, we formally changed our name from Indigenous Community Volunteers to Community First Development to better reflect the way that we're working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities first. And some of you have seen our branding, it's really quite obvious that we're holding that value close to our heart because we're saying community first development with our people, for our people. Our approach, as you can see on the screen, includes active listening and shared learning, understanding a community's challenges and vision, building on local strengths, knowledges and resources, matching skilled volunteers to activities designed and directed by communities, acknowledging communities' pace of activity development, and monitoring and evaluation of activities with community and volunteer input and participation. The framework is the model that we work to, and you can see it up on our screen now. It's a practical and well-documented approach that has the potential to be applied in a range of co-design and collaborative settings with First Nations people. A lot of time is invested in those first two stages to build understanding and relationships. We don't just jump in and start building. A lot of the groundwork is laid first. When we work this way, over time, we build trusting relationships with community members, and this is crucial to success for anybody who wants to work in our space. Where we're based, we are a national organisation, and we have community development team members based in a number of locations right across Australia. Lauren, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. Thanks. Over the past 20 years, we've engaged with over 800 communities and completed over 5,000 community development projects. In 2019-20, we engaged with 159 communities across Australia on 209 community development projects. But I just want to pause there for a sec to let that sink in. So we are active in a couple of hundred of communities, and the way that we work is by invitation. We only do by invitation and what community identifies as a priority. So that may tell you some things about our organisation and what we prioritise around people first and those trusting relationships that we've built over time, which makes our work sustainable. So now we're going to move into the discussion with the panel around the questions that have been put through earlier. I don't think we've had Doyen join us yet, so I think we'll just move to that first question. And Devon, I was wondering if you could answer this one. So one of the questions from a practitioner is, have you seen the framework, the community development framework, working in practice?
You're on mute, Devon.
Welcome, Doyen. Thank you for joining us. This question was to either of you, actually, Doyen or Devon, but I've landed it with Devon now. Have you seen this in practice, the framework and the way that we work?
Look, the simple answer to that is yes. Stephanie, thanks for that wonderful introduction, and good morning to all our guests to the webinar this morning. It is morning over here, it's nearly afternoon where probably everybody else is, but look, community first development, as it was then for us, was ICV, Indigenous Community Volunteers, and we invited community first development in, and I suppose the change agents, if you're a change agent out there, it's not an easy process to be able to start or begin an organisation from the ground up. And that's particularly what happens in our case, and a lot of cases in our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We're at the grassroots, we're at the coalface, we see what's required, we see what's needed, and that includes the organisations that we need to walk alongside us to come in and assist us, and that in this instance included community first development. And look, we'd done most of the groundwork by that point at that stage in our development, and we needed to progress to another level. And community first development came to our attention, and it was already on our radar. We knew what we had to do, bring them in to guide us through this process of authenticity, I suppose, and validating us further. Access to specialists, support above and beyond in a lot of instances with community first development here in WA, and it was quite a and it still is a journey. To the listeners out there, community first development is still a part of our development, and it's like having a big brother or a sister, really, for us. I can reach out if I need something, or even just to chat, quite honestly. And a lot of there's a few listeners or a few people attending today's webinar. I noticed Dr. Ian colleagues here. He was one of our assistants assisting us with our development, and he's in New South Wales, I believe. So they reach far and wide.
They certainly do. And if we're providing skilled support, as you know, we do try and send it locally. We are about building strong relationships, and it's usually a bit easier if you're sending someone down the road rather than across the country, but it's not always possible. Doyen, did you have anything to add to that? And I'm not sure when you joined us, but the question that had been sent in by a practitioner was, how have you seen the community development framework working in practice?
Well, it's important. It's a guide to how we work, and it needs to be flexible and adaptable when we work in communities, not only with the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre with Devon, but right across the board. It's adaptable, and they're all interconnected. And I suppose the key fundamental of the framework, our understanding of the key fundamental is build an understanding with the community that you're working with. Is like with Devon, is getting down on the ground and having a yarn, walking around, And part of that is also part of that process. You're engaging and empowering the community to take the next step to build and connect and so forth. It's for us working with Devon. We actually it's flexible enough so that when we look at the activities that we did, Devon, we're able to fill the gaps that were needed to drive the initiative of the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre forward. And like I said, it's and the relationships and the trust that come out of that over time. Devon can call me up at any time of the day and say, "Oh, Doyen, I need this person to help me out with this," and we're on the ball straight away. And I like how Devon calls our volunteers specialists, because they are specialists. They're coming in to work with the community, to build capacity, to drive initiative, but also in going back to building that understanding. You understand the vision of the community, you understand the dream of what the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre is trying to do, and we're able to co-design projects and also embed our monitoring and evaluation in the same process. So it's just like having a good yarn, walking around, and it's also about doing things the right way. Because with the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre, we're dealing with traditional owners who still follow traditional laws and custom. So it's not only that, it's also about doing everything the right way, and also Devon's role in this is to communicate that to the elders, and Devon will probably talk a little bit more about that. But it's about bringing everyone together so that the community owns the process, and it's driven by the community. It's not us going in with our own agenda. It's about sitting down, having a yarn, and also doing things the right way. More importantly, so
Absolutely. And you've touched on a couple of the key elements there around the way that we work, that it is grounded in culture, it's grounded in respect for our cultural norms and how we navigate that, because, you know, we're different nations, we're different peoples right across the country, we're all from different countries. Even just looking at my screen now, you know, where I can see that we're all, you know, different mob, and having respect to the way that we work, that's a flexible approach across the country, is pretty important. So picking up on some of the key themes that you were just talking about then, both Devon and Doyen, I think I'll direct this next question to Vicki and Renee. And we've been asked, why is the CD framework important? So why is the community development framework important? Renee, did you want to go first?
Yeah. So the community development framework is important because it works. The communities we work with, they know what they want, they know what they need, and nobody knows their communities better than them. You know, the communities don't need people telling them what to do. They need people to listen to what they need and what is important to them, and to work alongside them.
For sure. It's that whole talking with your ears approach, hey?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Vicki, from a community perspective then, so you've engaged Community First Development to support some of the work that Mob Aboriginal Corporation is taking forward. Why do you think the CD framework is important, based on your experience?
Well, when we first started, we never thought about becoming a corporation. And I know Renee from a while back, you know, like, and I've worked really well with her, and she's an awesome person. But we were just hanging out, you know, like with the elders and everything else, and they've turned around and said that they want to create a organisation and a space to make them feel safe, and where they're heard, and they can, you know, like do cultural and practices and things like that. And so we sat down with them, and I asked them what they wanted. And there was a lot of, you know, like yarning and things like that, and a lot of coffees and smoking and yarning and things like that. And then it came up to say, yeah, you know, like we've got the ground rules. The community knows what they want. They want somebody to walk with them to create this. And you guys did it, you know, and you gave us the nudge to push forward. And it's the best thing ever, you know. We haven't been able to meet for a while, so we still have contact over the phone and that. For 6 months last year, while we were kind of still in lockdown, a lot of the community was still meeting every Friday just to touch bases. And we actually created a 10-metre painting, which we donated to St John of God over here. And that was from, all that's from, you know, like Renee and you guys helping us, you know, like walk that same path together and sharing.
Yeah. And I think it's really important too that, you know, the communities, they own these projects. This is their work. We're just there to walk next to them, to assist them in achieving the goals that they've identified for themselves.
No, you don't walk next to us, you walk with us.
Yes.
It's a really big distinction, isn't it? And it's a really important one. It is really not about imposing anything. It has got to be community-led. We know our own mob. We know what our challenges are. We know what they are in our community. We know what success looks like. And we've got the response. We've got the answers. We just need some support from time to time.
Yeah.
And only, Pat, I should say, if at any time you want to chime in, I won't call on you specifically, but if ever you want to add something, put your hand up and I'll make sure I call on you.
Oh, no. Thank you for the invitation, Steph, the extra one. Thank you.
Thank you. Doyen, you had your hand up, or are you just saying hi to Pat? You're on mute, Doyen.
Yeah, I had my hand up, and I was only just talking to Renee yesterday about the diversity of communities that we work with, and that the model that the community development framework is flexible enough to work across the diversity of communities that we work with, whether it's in an urban setting or in a regional setting or remote, and it's flexible enough to work across all communities, regardless of your location. And we had a good old yarn about the differences and everything like that, but the model works really well.
It sure does. Thank you, everyone. This next question, you know, I was in two minds about whether to include it or not, because as an organisation, we don't talk about ourselves really. We don't talk about our work much. We really are some quiet achievers because we're really focused on making sure that the voices that are heard are community voices, and it is their work and their contribution and their successes. But one of our supporters sent this question in, and I'm going to hand it over to Vicki and Devon, I think, because otherwise it sounds really gammon that we're talking about ourselves. What makes community first development a leader in this space? And I think what we're focusing on here is how is this approach different to others you've experienced? So, Vicki, back to you first. How is our approach working with you different to others that you've worked with over time?
You guys don't have a agenda that we've got to go with. Because I wear so many different hats in my community, like I live and I work in my community. I can't really say how it does work, but it just does, because, you know, like we're all Koori, okay? We all know what we want, and we think we know what the community wants, but we need the community to tell us what they want. And you guys walk with us. You don't walk beside us. You don't walk behind us or walk in front of us. You walk with us. And it's just a model that is culturally sensitive. You're respectful of all needs, and that's really all. And you're inclusive of all, and that's what Mad Mob is. Okay, people love the name because, you know, like, how can you call yourself Mad Mob Aboriginal Corporation? We're all as mad as cut snakes, I'm telling you. Right? And we Mad Mob is 100% accredited. Okay, Renee's been with me the whole time. We have no funding. We have no workers. Hawkesbury City Council give us a room that we can meet. We get donations. We apply for very tiny little funding grants. We meet once a week. We create a safe place. Anybody is welcome. It doesn't matter who they are.
I was actually just going to say, I think it's important that we give Mad Mob a plug if you wanted to tell us a little bit about what your organisation does.
What do we do?
Well, you're a safe place is what you live with.
We do. We've actually created a safe place. We meet, we have a yarn, we do artwork, we do whatever the community wants to do. All I do is provide a place for the community. And then, you know, like, I get dragged into it, and then Renee gets dragged into it, and we love getting dragged in. We actually run a art group every second Wednesday night when we're allowed out to play. And we have a lot of Indigenous foster children that come. And that's really important to me because the foster parents reach out and they say, we want somewhere where the community to come. What's the age limit? There is no age limit. Our youngest community person that comes is 3 years old. Our oldest is 78 years old. That doesn't matter what they do. They can come and just sit and have a yarn and a good laugh. Come and tell us some dirty jokes. I'll tell you, I can tell you some dirty jokes from a lot of our community members.
Do I have to moderate this webinar? Hang on a second.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I'll be dropping nothing.
I just find it interesting that you said, oh, look, I don't do anything. Mad Mob, you know, it's just a place, but it's not. It's a community gathering place. It's culturally safe. It supports cultural learning and connection to country, culture, language, you know. I was saying this question's awkward for me to say because I don't want to talk about ourselves, and then you sit there and don't talk about yourself. So
we're not. Well, I'm not one to put myself up there. Renee and I work extremely hard behind the scenes, and then we'll shove somebody really hard up the front to take the glory because we won't do it.
It seems to be a recurring theme, that servant leadership model for organisations in our space. Devon. Thanks, Vicki. Devon, just to take you back, how do you think our approach is different? So Community First Development's approach, you touched on this in your first answer, actually. So if you wanted to tell us that and then just tell us a little bit about the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre, please.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. And Sister Vicki, that was, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually. Inclusivity is one of those words that first come to mind with regards to community first development, and I think another word to that is it enables poor fellas like us, to feel empowered as well. It gives us the opportunities to be able to have access, like I say, to specialists who, you wouldn't otherwise, be able to have access to be quite honest. And that's another thing too. It's just nice. It's comforting. It's reassuring to know that, our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters out there that volunteer their time to promote, our self-determination is just it's overwhelmingly on reflection it's always overwhelmingly warm and fuzzy. you know, to know that there is a big sector of non-Indigenous people out there, and you know, want to see Aboriginal people and our communities succeed in the face of adversity, and I think that's what community first development does. You know, for any organisation, you know, we work with a particular cohort in our community. The men that use violence is who we work with, and look, the bottom line is most of society wants them locked up at the end of the day, and that has been the case for a long time. You know, even back as far when I was a child. And look, when I was a child, was over, you know, 50, nearly 60 years ago, the violence was still then, family violence. And quite frankly, not much has changed. Women are still the subject of abuse, and men are in the same position as they were back then. My father, I had nowhere to take him, as an example. And I'm sure anybody that's here on, you know, this forum today, you know, when they do an intervention, there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to take the male, albeit call the police, and straight away that becomes a punitive process that we're introducing into our communities, and that seems, you know, that seems to be a double-edged sword in that respect, because you know, women, a lot of women, a significant amount of women don't like their men, you know, to be arrested and jailed, and they have this relationship with police anyway. With you know, our communities, it's quite strained with police, particularly with the, you know, the amount of deaths in custody, and the overrepresentation. So yeah, that's the AMHC. Community First Development have put us in a position today of authority, really. Like I said earlier, they've assisted in validating and authenticating our service delivery.
Thanks, Doyen. Devon, I was looking at Doyen, you're swapping across my screen. Thanks, Devon. I guess just to land that a little bit more, given that we've got primarily practitioners and research and educators in this forum, what you're talking about is really timely. You know, we're having this week's the national discussion on violence against women being held here locally, and deaths in custody obviously is an issue that is impacting all of us. And these issues aren't just in our space, you know, these are societal issues that impact across the nation. I guess in our space, though, we have additional trauma from the impacts of colonisation, and I think coming from a healing space rather than a punitive approach is acknowledging that. And what I like in hearing both you and Vicki speak, and also our team members, is we're just acknowledging what is. You know, this is the reality. We're no better or worse than other people. In a lot of cases, this disadvantage has to be acknowledged. It's not unique to us. But what we're really focused on is moving forward. We're focused on finding our own solutions, finding what works for us, and looking beyond that gap of disadvantage, coming from a place where we're all thriving as people. So I appreciate you speaking so openly and vulnerably about that. Devon.
Yeah, just look further, just quickly to that. Look, it's not as though we don't, you know, ask governments, ask our, you know, our protectors, whoever they might be. But the thing is with us is that a lot of Aboriginal people and organisations, we don't see the need to ask anymore. We just got to do. And I, you know, Community First Development is one of those organisations that that engender that process. You know, about because they don't ask you questions that like you know, simple question, can you do this? You know,
Yeah.
can you afford to do this? And all of those sort of those questions like that. It's just, yep, no worries. What do you need?
Exactly. And we can't afford not to do it in many cases. It's not about whether we can afford to do it. We have no options.
Thank you.
Thanks, Devon. Another question that came in was somebody who's read our framework, and I think it was also probably on the webinar that we had last week around, was it last week, the week before, the Action Research Project report. Monitoring and evaluation is an important component throughout the framework. What evaluation approaches are inclusive for those with lived experiences? And I think, Doyen, you're probably best placed to provide a response to this question.
Yeah, monitoring and evaluation is also not only important for an important part of the framework, it's embedded in our workflow so that we capture the impacts of the work when working with communities. But also, more importantly, it helps communities to understand where they are in mapping towards their vision and tracking towards their vision and catching the impact of our work. It starts off from the beginning when we start to build our understanding with the community, that first step in understanding and going around, and it's embedded in the workflow. It's not something that is separate. It's part of our everyday work. It's something that we don't catch or measure later or at the end. It starts at the very beginning where we first start yarning with communities from the very beginning. And that's important, so that the first thing is that we understand that, are we on the right track, Devon, or are we getting there yet? It's about just measuring where you are, but also capturing the impact of our work with the communities we work with quite broadly. And embedding the monitoring and evaluation, there's a lot more richer conversations as a part of it, and we draw out information a lot better and understanding community and community's need by bringing monitoring and evaluation, participatory monitoring and evaluation right at the very beginning, and it's an important part of our work. It's not something that an appendix on the side. It's intertwined with our project work, just like this, and and also how we talk with communities, all interlinked. That framework is all interlinked in about capturing the information that's not only important to capturing impact, but also to potentially to influence policies and procedures for government in the future. So it becomes a framework to create and change. But more importantly, that with the monitoring and evaluation embedded, we are capturing the voice of our communities right at the very beginning. Capturing the voice of the community, that's the fundamental key thing of the importance of having that embedded right at the very beginning with the community, the voice of the people.
Absolutely. And you know where I think the gold is in that is community mob are identifying what success looks like for them for that project. It's not about bums on seats, people through the door for training. It's not about output. It's around what is the value and what does success look like to the community who've invited us in. Because at the end of the day, it's not actually up to us to determine what that value is. It might be, well, it could be anything. We might look at it in a really abstract way and go, well, to us, that probably only means this. But to the community that we're supporting, it might be everything. You know, so having that M&E embedded all the way through, having those conversations and seeing how the success grows, but also stopping, reflecting and celebrating, which I'm not sure we always do well. You know, it's one of those things that we acknowledge, but we don't actually just stop and pause and go, you know what, even this part of the success is important to acknowledge. And the only way you can know that you're there is because it's being monitored as you go through. Otherwise, you don't know where you're at, where your success point is. Sorry, Doyen?
Yeah, and success can be as simple as, which I liked, and the community identified as part of their monitoring evaluation as part of the project in capturing change, kids having fun. That can be more simple than that.
Well,
And
absolutely.
it's the community that determined that, kids having fun.
But you're
So
also in empowering the community to take ownership, and you're also teaching the kids of tomorrow, our leaders of tomorrow, that this works.
That's a really good point. The next questions are actually about the report that I referred to just before on right way governance. And it acknowledged the community's done a lot of work in yarning on their plans and goals before we start partnering with them. And Vicki and Devon, you both talked about this. And so the question was, how do we make sure that right way yarning is embedded for everyone working with community, so that work and yarning that happens before engagement is recognised and understood? So it's a bit of a long question. So I'll just repeat that last part because I know that you know what I'm talking about in terms of right way yarning. How do we make sure right way yarning is embedded for anyone working with community, so that that work and yarning happens before engagement is recognised and understood? Vicki and Renee, would you like to come over to this? Renee, would you go first?
Yep. So in the community development framework, we have a part that's engage and empower, and it's the first steps in capturing the people's voice, it's seeing the community's vision and understanding their dreams. And yarning is our engagement. Right way is the culturally appropriate way. So we listen to the community, we hear their voice, we respect that, capture their voice of the community and their goals, as opposed to going in with our own agenda. So we'll go in, we'll sit down, have a cup of tea, have a yarn with them, find out what's important to them.
For sure. Vicki, did you want to reflect on that question?
Well, exactly what Renee just stated is what's happened with us, but it took our mob out here a couple of months to figure out exactly what the community wanted and what was the most important for them first. And so we actually have a wish list, and it was to have a corporation, to create a safe space, to sit down and have a yarn, to be inclusive of all, to raise our children and our future, elders and leaders in a safe community, and to actually have the rest of our community acknowledge that we are here and we're not going away. And you're very welcome to join us if you wish to. Yeah, and it was about choices as well.
It's good to have a choice. Hey, if people are coming in and doing things to us, even if they're meaning well and think it's the right thing to do, it removes choice. So I guess at the basis of all this and what you've been talking about is that self-agency. It's working to the principles of self-determination.
Yeah.
Don't come in and assume that you know what we need, or, ask the question, do the yarning, do right way yarning, and talk with your ears. Ask the question and listen to what we're saying. So don't come in with a preconceived view of what you think the problems are and what you think the answers are, because it takes us out of that process, And I think one of the things that we are most proud to work to is honouring those tenements of self-agency. If if it's about us, it's got to be with us. And what's that old saying? Nothing about us without us. Have
Yeah,
us as part
exactly.
of those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's why Mad Mob goes so well, is because we haven't got funding. We all volunteer our time. If we need something, we just go and buy it. Like we personally do that. I know I've done a lot, and it's for everybody. It's not just for me, it's for everybody. And I think that's why we get on so well and we work so well, is because we're not bound by funding. We're not bound by another service giving us money to keep us going, because we got none and we're happy.
I don't know that I'd be happy if we didn't have funding.
Well, that's
no, I understand what you mean. It means that there are no other things to meet. You know, you're running your own show.
Pulling the strings for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the next question is actually around funding. So it was a question to CFD, Community First Development, about our funding model. And there were two parts to the question. It's what is your funding model and how does funding influence your approach? So I might take this one if that's okay. So our funding, we are primarily funded by generous people right across Australia. So it's families sticking their hand in their pockets and funding us through regular donations. And, you know, when we first started this journey to become a more self-determining organisation ourselves, we had a really strong board who believed that we could do this and believed in people, and I hoped that we could do it, but was perhaps a little bit cynical about whether this would actually work. But you know, last year we had around 75,000 financial gifts into the organisation, small amounts, middle amounts, large amounts. It all adds up. And this is people right across Australia who truly believe in the process of self-determination and supporting people to lead their own lives. And, you know, it's really humbling as the CEO of the organisation to be in that position. So I know we have some funders as well as practitioners on this webinar, and I give to you my most humble, sincere thank you for your support, because without you, we couldn't do this. We do receive, yes, absolutely, thanks, Devon, a big handout to our supporters. We do receive some federal funding. It's not our primary funding source by any means, although we're always open to government conversations. We do have a really strong relationship with government, which is important because we're collecting a lot of really important information and data through our M&E, and that needs to go somewhere. You know, one of our strategic goals is to support and influence social policy in our space, and we can do that by providing the evidence of what works through our processes, such as our community development framework. So it's important that we have a dialogue with both Minister Wyatt and government, both state and federal. So we do enjoy some government funding, and we also have a corporate partner who supports us in a really interesting way. They're not about big noting that they do it. They're actually a very quiet partner, but it's all about a relationship. They genuinely want to know us and know the work that we do and the communities that we support, and we feel very privileged to be in that position with them. So I guess that goes to part two of this question: how does funding influence our approach? It doesn't. It doesn't influence. We don't deliver programs on behalf of government. We don't deliver programs on behalf of supporters. Our work is always led by community. We only work at invitation, and we only work on what community identifies as their priority. We are fortunate that a lot of the important initiatives in community also align with what's needed under the National Agreement for Closing the Gap. So we are able to meet our funding requirements or our approval processes with federal government. It's around 10 or 12% of our funding comes from them, but we're not doing anything different. It just means that the work that we do in community that fits in with those national Closing the Gap parameters can be allocated to that funding. So we're very fortunate that we are not in a position where we have to change any of our model, and we won't. We know this model is sustainable. We know that it is culturally safe. It is grounded in culture, and it supports agency and self-determination. So that's a long answer to probably what could have been a short one. How does funding influence your approach? It just doesn't. We work to the model that we have just launched through UniPAT. The next question was, how might we work together? Actually, I might go, I'll answer this too. I just didn't want to go straight into me answering another question. I think I will save that one to last if that's okay, because I think it's more holistic for everybody that's on the webinar today. So the next question, how can schools partner with the community as mutual support? Renee and Doyen, can you have a talk about how we share the principles or approach and how that might work in this setting? Doyen, did you want to go first?
I was hoping you was going to palm this off to Renee.
I can palm it off to Renee. You've got so much wisdom. Why would I not go to you first?
I think the important. Could you repeat that question again?
Sure. How can schools partner with the community as mutual support?
As mutual support, I think the important thing with schools and partner with the community. I think the important thing is for schools to engage with the community. That's the important thing, to sit down, have a yarn, and it needs to be a two-way partnership where terms are not necessarily dictated by one partner, but a general mutual respect for each other's understanding and working together to make the kids, our kids' lives better, so that the relationship is genuine. It's not just about the school dictating terms, but it's about schools genuinely engaging with the community and sitting down and having a talk and a yarn and start to build an understanding of the needs in the community and address concerns or developing new ways of doing business to improve the lives of our kids at school. I'll hand it over to Renee.
Thanks, Renee. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think Doyen summed it up there pretty much. I'd say the same thing, understanding the community where the school is located and engage with the community, have a yarn with them, listen to what is important to them, what they would like to see for their community, their kids within the school, and develop that mutual understanding of what they see as important. It's about building those relationships with the community because they have the cultural knowledge and the local expertise of that community, and you know that's an important part to the success of all activities. And working with the community to develop the objectives around what they've identified as priorities and develop a plan with them to meet those objectives.
Yeah, it just resonates so strongly, hey, whether it's schools or other community orgs or whoever it is, the principles, the way that we work is the same. Get to know us, build a relationship, talk with your ears, ask the questions, but then really deeply listen to the answer and work with us. Don't do things to us, but allow us to have that self-agency. Don't try and impose anything upon us. And my team are probably cringing a bit because they know what I'm going to say next, because it's a key bugbear of mine. Is I think that we should have an elder in residence program for all of our schools. We have artists in residence, we have writers in residence. I don't see why we can't have an elders in residence program, not just for our schools, but for major corporates, any business, any learning institute, pretty much any organisation. How can people support us if they don't know us? And could you imagine how powerful that would be to have an elder in residence at the school, a safe place where our kids and non-First Nations kids can come and talk and in a safe space, I think we would see a pretty dramatic reduction in racism if we could have a space like that right across the country. The last question was really how might we work together, and I think we've pretty much answered that. Through the schools question, it is about building relationships. Please support us. You can head over to our website, would be a good place to start too if you want to register to learn more interest about the community development framework and the process that we go through, that cycle. And it goes for any community organisation, but there's ways you can intersect with community first development through either supporting us through being a supporter, a donor, volunteering your expertise, coming and having a yarn with us. We're pretty good at that. Come and have a cuppa and sit and talk with us, get to know us, and we're more than happy to share the way that we work, because we want to see this embedded everywhere. It can't be just for the communities that we work with. It's got to be the communities right across Australia. So everyone in this space, I believe strongly, should be taking this approach. Lauren, if you could just bring up that last slide, please, because I want to thank we're almost out of time, so I'm going to stop yarning and thank everybody for attending today. Thank you for everybody sending questions. We're really sorry we couldn't get to them all. There's our framework there for you. Obviously, there's more depth in the publication if you want to have a read. We will be looking at some training seminars coming up soon, so if you want to know more, please register interest on that. And I want to now give a big thank you to Auntie Pat Anderson for launching both the webinar and the framework. We really value your wisdom as an elder and somebody who is utterly committed to advancing the rights of First Nations people. And I want to thank our panellists, Doyen, Devon, Vicki and Renee, and also our team behind the webinar who do a lot of the hard yards but don't get a lot of public credit. So my thanks to you also. Did anybody want to say anything else in final? Annie Pat, were you?
No, I think this has been a great seminar, a lot of information. I would encourage people to access the guide. Anybody that's really interested, and I think it's essential reading for anybody that might want to work with us. And thank you all for taking the time to attend the webinar, really interesting webinar today for the work that this great organisation does. I really thank you very much for that. And it's been my absolute pleasure to have been asked to be part of today's ceremony. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and thank you for being with us. It's an interesting format. We really wanted to have an info session with practitioners. So rather than lots of slides, we thought we would do what we do best, which is, have a yarn, get to know us. I hope you all stay safe. For those of you who are in lockdown, I hope that this goes some way to keeping your spirits high. There is some really great work happening right across this place, across the countries, right across Australia, and I hope that you stay safe, keep spirits high, and we get an opportunity to talk with you again soon. Thank you very much.